Welcome to Deep Thought. See the big picture during research. This is very important. This is why I said in the previous podcast, examine counter arguments. You gotta see the big picture. Because remember what I also said during it. People have a tendency just to see their own bias, their own area and stuff, right? And that's the thing with humans in general. Everybody doesn't see things the same way. If I may use the analogy of animals, and I think I've talked about different brain levels, right? And since this is the Deep Thought channel, let me go into it just real briefly. There are 7 levels to the brain. I'll just go over the first 3, right? There's the lizard brain. That's very instinctual. People who operate at that level, they just see their immediate environment. They don't really go beyond that. It's like if you live in a certain neighborhood, you'll see just what's in that neighborhood. Like you get some poor people, they don't really go beyond that neighborhood. They don't really go, they go to school there. At best, they might work there. They don't go beyond it. They don't travel to other cities or anything. So they don't see beyond that, right? And then you get another level, and this is more the insect brain. What you see is what the masses see, what the group sees. You very identified with the group. So, and that's still that goes a little bit beyond the neighborhood. And plus it's bringing in somebody else's perceptions, right? Or what you might be told, right? And the insect brain is like the ant. The ant might see just the yard it's in. You don't see like the other side of the block or something. It's not going to go that far. And it's aware of what's in its immediate area, right? But then you got the third level, that's called the bird brain. It sounds goofy and stuff, but what it is, if you think about a bird, the bird sees the bigger picture. It sees everything. It sees beyond what the lizard will see or the reptile will see. It sees beyond what the ant will see. It sees the whole area. It sees the whole environment, right? When you're doing research, you got to be at that bird level. You got to see the big picture. Now, in the previous podcast, I talked about examining counter arguments. When you do that, you see all sides of the picture. And you want to try to see. It can still be difficult. You can't see everything, right? Let me use an example. People familiar, my most popular channel is my main channel where I'm talking about relationships and man gets women, right? But sometimes you'll get some guys on there who would identify as incel. And they'll feel like only certain type of men get women or they don't get women. Or you get other guys that feel like all women behave a certain way, right? They'll feel like that, but that's their perception. Because first of all, they haven't seen all women. The most women they've seen is those they encountered in their environment who might have behaved that way. But if you had a larger, bigger perspective, you've seen all types of behavior. You've seen women behave badly, but you've seen women behave like angels. So you see that. And the same thing with women in that situation. You get some women, they only see some guys, they just bad and stuff, but that's their environment. That's their perception. A woman with better perception, you say, well, no, I've seen men who did this, men who did that, and everything, right? You want to do that during research. You want to try as best as possible to see it all. Not what your bias says, but the big picture. Let me use the example of race. Now, in doing research, I've seen some stuff from people who consider themselves white nationalists. And they'll say, these black people do this, these black people do that, right? And I'm like, what black people you been hanging around? They can be accurate in saying like some behave a certain way, but then there's the other ones. Or if you talk about the history, because you get some white nationalists who will say, Well, blacks didn't accomplish this, and this in history, even though history has shown, yeah, they have. They had civilizations that risen and fallen like every other group. That's the big picture, but somebody might be just focusing on what they seeing right in front of them, and that could be a myriad of things. All right. So when you're doing the research, your ultimate goal is to see everything, even the ideas. When I said like examine counter arguments, those are ideas that might go against it, but it's still there. You have to look at it because you want to see. The more you see, the better you get an understanding of whatever subject you're doing. You might be looking into it. Now, I started this saying this week talking about the research into natural sex appeal. Now, because I wanted to see the big picture, it wasn't about, it's really just came off of a question that I had. It's an observation I made. So I said, let me research this. But then in researching, I got to see a whole lot of bigger things. Like one of the main things I saw is the connection between sexuality and spirituality. Now, when I saw it, I ain't think, of course, I ain't think anything of it. I didn't think anything of it, but as I got more in deeper, I was like, wait a minute, this is a bigger thing. See, the thing is, when you see the big picture, you get introduced to a lot more, or at least looking for the big picture. If you see everything, all of a sudden, it's like, wow, these things are connected. Let me use the sexuality thing. When I first doing that research into natural sex appeal, I didn't think about how what you eat could affect your sexual drive. I didn't think about that at all. But then when I started looking at doing the research and looking into the big picture, it's like, well, wait a minute. If a man eats too much soy, that can actually hurt him. But then if a man eats a lot of nuts and dry foods, leafy foods, that actually helps him. Or if limiting the amount of meat, not necessarily cutting it out, but limiting the amount of meat you eat can affect not just your sexuality, but your entire health. Or even the type of meats you eat. It doesn't have a lot of antibiotics. All of a sudden, for one little thing, from one little question, you see how everything's connected. Even in the research, I saw how religious principles have affected sexual energy throughout history. Because I looked for just doing the research, and I started looking. I wasn't just saying, "Oh, I want this natural thing." Just, figure it out. Or some people might get into it to figure out how they could generate it. I was like, no, it's a bigger thing. All of a sudden, because everything is holistic. Because as you do research, you might find out that something is connected to what you research by, and it's like there's no visible connection, but it's still there. Even money. Let me use a sexual example again. By doing the research, I saw how a lot of people actually make their money by exploiting a person's natural sexual nature. If you look at advertisements and everything, if you look at movies, the media, they use their sexual energy to a big extent. That's why movie stars, and they're not the best actors, but they look a certain way so people are watching. That's why when they sell stuff, they use beauty to sell it. And even doing that research, you're seeing how much that's deeper than people think. It's more than just aesthetics. So it's just like, wow. So it's like you want to see the big picture because it actually opens your mind up. You see more. Then you have more to pull from, because once you do that research, it's like ultimately when you're researching, you're doing it just to have a better understanding in life, to expand your mind. And to get through life, ultimately, is about your mind. Ultimately, it's about your mind. And so you want to expand that to the greatest extent possible, because the more you can see, the more you understand, the more you can use it to impact everyday decisions. If you use some research, you understand if you move to a particular area, what problems you could have or what benefits you could have, or what type of job you could get, everything, even in mating, especially in mating. So you always want to see the big picture. So I want y'all to really keep that in mind. So think on everything I've said this week. Peace and blessings.